So today I would like to welcome Terra Rogers to our CEO chat. Terra is currently the program director of Super Hot Rock Energy at the Clean Air Task Force, a 501c3. Prior to her time at the Clean Air Task Force, Terra was the data center campus facility manager at Facebook. Previous to that, she was the managing member at Zephyr Consulting, was the senior vice president at Alta Rock Energy, and the director of project controls, Ram Power Corp. Terra, welcome to Deep Power today.
Thank you, Andrew.
It's a pleasure to have you today. I'm excited. I know we've been able to spend some time with you and your team, getting to know you and a little bit more about Clean Air Task Force. I'm really excited to have you on as a guest today because I see Clean Air Task Force playing a very important role in this geothermal energy space. I would love for you to be able to share with me and our audience, what is Clean Air Task Force? Tell me about what your mission is and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Clean Air Task Force, we are a global scale NGO, non-governmental organization. Our mission is to safeguard against the worst effects of climate change. We've been in operation for well over 25 years now. And really, if you don't mind, I'm going to refer to it as CATF.
Sure.
Hung their original shingle, again, about 25 years ago, by setting their focus on the emissions from coal-fired power plants. So this was like a small, scrappy team of predominantly lawyers and advocates that wanted to, we'll call it simultaneously, address some of the issues that they see in environmental degradation, but also in the people that have to live and function in it. And because of their success in that campaign, CATF today has been recognized as having mitigated millions of tons of pollutants, but maybe even more importantly, saving thousands of lives of those that lived and breathed near these power plants. So that has been the CATF's MO. What it has expanded into due to recognition of success and impact in climate. They've taken on many other programs, and actually the Super Hot Rock team, my team here, is one of the newest to join the Clean Air Task Force. If you don't mind, I'll go just a little bit deeper into some of those programs. I think it would give a little clarity. To be invited into the inner circle of CATF as a program, you have to be basically two things. You have to be a technological solution that is, one, nascent, and two, transformative. In the transformative side, I think that is sort of the true, if successful, you will have a measurable effect on decarbonizing the energy grid and the energy system. And so, of course, Super Hot Rock fits that perfectly. And then nascent is really a call out to the fact that what you don't see in our program is an offshore wind or a solar. And that's because the superpower that is a non-governmental agency or a nonprofit in this space, they don't need that superpower now. They're sort of out of the shell and working up that commercialization curve. It is now turning our focus on what is truly transformative as opposed to sort of incremental improvements on what is known.
I think that's an interesting beginning. I mean, it's in the name, Clean Air Task Force. Now I know from conversations and what you've just said, really trying to help broadcast those new technologies. And I don't know if this is how you see yourself, but from my communications with you and your team, really see you guys as a thought leader and a connector. And I know you're not a lobbyist group, but I really see you out in front connecting the industry so that we all have a kind of collective voice maybe. And I know you're not an association either, which is sometimes what kind of plays that role, but we do need someone out there kind of representing the industry. And from my background, it seems like there's a lot of competition and someone's trying to be the first to that breakthrough technology. And when that happens, oftentimes there's a a barrier, right, or a firewall between communicating with other companies in the industry. So I'm grateful that you guys kind of play a role where you can connect, you can bring resources together, and you're kind of that Switzerland almost, right, where we're not threatened by what you're doing. You're helping us. You're not a competitor to any of these technologies, and so I appreciate that role. Would you agree that kind of is a role that you play?
Absolutely, and I appreciate some of the adjectives that you're using. I think that what we are seeing across our industry as a whole is we are lacking the platform to share, right? The idea of sharing both learnings and even sort of new tools and techniques. And you can see that, if you were to look at analogies, for example, in the fracking effort, um, that was what moved it so quickly, was a platform and ability and willingness to share. I suspect, and this is my own anecdotal observations, that this is also exacerbated by the way that many of the industry, we'll call it the next generation of geothermal, looking at R&D. They're often backed by venture, and of course, venture is going to monetize based on findings, trade secrets, et cetera. And that makes it even harder to have this platform and find a trusted space. So things that my team is working on today is focusing on unique technical pillars where we see companies engaging and doing so, asking them questions about how they're doing it and where they see gaps and where their science stops. And we look for the gaps in between. What we know that this group is taking on this and that group is taking on that. So then create awareness around that nobody's really looking at, for example, this space in earnest. And of course, the only way that we could offer that type of insight is by creating and safeguarding the trust with the companies.
Yeah, which you have, and you and your associates have already been helpful in connecting me to other people in this industry that I may not have already known. So that's been useful and effective. I think your background's interesting, and I'd love to just quickly get a little bit of that background. You were at Facebook, you were at Altarock. How did you, one, get to really the geothermal industry and then subsequently to the CATF?
Oh, I'll be terribly, maybe even embarrassingly honest. As a chemical engineer, I was, we all are lured by things that interest us. I was young and I was lured into Venezuela and the oil and gas sector, but it took about 1 year to realize that, boy, every extra hour that you spend is barely worth it. Mm. And so fortunately, that was also a booming time for biofuels. And so I was able to transition into that. I spent about 5 years in anaerobic digester of cow manure. So I was a specialist in all things disgusting. And then I went on to business school. And it was during that time where the price of gas dropped out significantly. And my leadership team of the previous company sort of went to the wind. And one of them started to ask questions about geothermal. And as he asked questions, I started asking questions, and candidly, it just sounded too good to be true. The idea of, a base load, firm source, inexhaustible, and really quite long lived in terms of the asset life source of electricity was just, like I said, almost unbelievable. So I followed him after business school, and we built what I might still consider crown jewel in my career. We built the San Jacinto site in Nicaragua. Unfortunately, I'd call it that was probably the end of my honeymoon with geothermal, because what I then learned quickly after I pulled my head out of the, deep work there, and I realized there just wasn't enough of these being built there. The financing was complicated, the locations in which the ecosystem could support both the cost and the very physical requirements of the conventional geothermal world were so limited. And that was, I'll call it, a very hard decade of understanding the PPA structure and what needed to happen across the system to be able to get geothermal to scale, make it happen and possible anywhere, and at a price that is functional in our growing economies. And ultimately, China and India are going to be the ones that need energy, and we need to make this possible at their sites. So the R&D side, we started to work down that path and still came across huge obstacles, dominantly in being able to secure funds, funds likely necessary from the public sector. And by the way, if you look back over all energy, specifically in the renewable sector, you will not find a singular one that took off without the support of public funding. So it, again, another embarrassing admission is that I didn't consider the superpower of a NGO or a nonprofit in the space until one came knocking. So that's how I got to know CATF, is they found me, started to talk to me about some of their successes in CCS and methane. And I realized this, this unique, not only having the Rolodex of 20 plus years of building trust and credibility, but also knowing that these scientists have nothing to gain when we suggest that the public funds go in this direction. We will not make a dime of it. But we are doing this because we see this as the next transformative state, needs of the world, and of course for the country in which we're talking with. So that's how I went through geothermal and CATF, and now find the current role just particularly exciting. There are so few people truly advocating and raising awareness around the real potential impact that geothermal can have.
Thank you for that background. And I also appreciate you touched on several of the hurdles that are commonly faced in this space, which people often ask me why, what are those obstacles and what will keep geothermal from advancing? And you mentioned, funding's huge. Anytime you're researching and developing a new technology, it takes time and it costs a lot of money. Also, the public perception, especially when it comes to drilling, there's still, I found, a common misconception that this is, it's going to have the same environmental impact as oil and gas drilling, and really the 80% of the drilling is traditional oil and gas, right? And then once you try to get to that super hot rock, that's a whole new technology that doesn't exist yet. But a lot of people are confused, and so there's a lot of misconception, and it's going to take a lot of effort from all of us and the public and our leaders in government, I guess, to understand the difference, the potential, and then how clean it can be in renewable. So I appreciate those hurdles being shared, because oftentimes when people talk to me about geothermal, as you're probably more familiar, they say, "Oh, my uncle has a geothermal well that heats his pool," right? And you're like, "Oh, cool, great, that's awesome," and that's been around for hundreds of years. But what you and I are talking about is the true potential of super hot rock, 400 degrees Celsius, where you can really power cities. And to do that, and to your point, governments have to be involved. And I hate that. I hate when you have to involve governments. But to your point, solar, wind, nothing that was sustainable could get root without that government intervention. So again, a role that you play is to help be a voice. And I know you do have connections into Congress and Washington and maybe state levels, and that will continue to be important. So thank you for that. You talk to a lot more companies than I do in this space. I'm curious, from the technology you've seen, is it potential to tap super hot rock within the next 10 years from what you're seeing?
That is that.
It's a loaded
question, but I am going to take a stab.
Okay.
The short answer is yes, if we get significant and patient funding in some of those key hurdle areas. The first one that is very popular, I think, popular currently, and thank goodness it is to deep dive around the transparency and clarity in our regulatory system. The ability to be able to forecast the timeline within a reasonable number of months, or let's say reasonable number of months, hopefully we can get it down to that, is key to funding. If you cannot predict reasonably your timeline, we cannot get the investment needed to even consider the field or the lease. I think the second one that has to happen in order to keep learning from these, from our experiences, is we need to invest in some laboratory spaces. And, for example, what we should be doing actively is we need some large scale, for example, meter by meter-ish rock mechanics labs, so that we understand how rock responds under these higher temperatures and pressures. We need to know more about geochemistry. We need to know quite a bit more about how to economically improve the metallurgy within our casing at these higher temperatures and pressures. And the same thing for cements. So if we can get more regulatory clarity, we can get some additional and accessible laboratory space, right? Accessible to those in the field. And then finally, I think most importantly, is that we start to see real R&D happening in the field, because without reaching those depths, we cannot mimic the environment in the bench scale. We cannot iterate quickly in order to learn from the anticipated failures. And that is what we're doing. We're finding the edge of the known ability of any given material, and we're pushing it. So we should be patient. And of course, this is one of the drums that we beat regularly when we talk with legislators, is that this is not something that you can really do in the dark corners of a bench space. You have to see this in the field, which kind of gets back to your point earlier around the importance of public funding, and that there are simply too many zeros on these anticipated failures. Failures meaning perhaps, for example, a casing failure or a cement failure, is for us to expect the private sector to be able to take it on its own. So those are the areas. If we see those addressed, I think the 2030s are going to be a year, I'll call it a decade of proliferation and learning. What is the best approach? How do we drop that dollar per kilowatt hours bogey necessary to make this really possible globally? So that is, I do believe it is possible, and I will also caveat this with, there are plenty of areas in the world that have shallow, super hot reserves. And the idea of some of our currently available drilling technologies reaching 400 degrees Celsius in some of these more shallow reserves is believed to be reasonable today. So that is to say that we should be tapping it shortly and really testing this again before the 2030s, assuming access to some of these learnings and evolutions.
Absolutely. I think several of those points were very important. As technology advances, I guess, every several years they call it like the half-life of technology, right? The speed at which technology is evolving and progressing is so fast that maybe 5 years ago, no one in the drilling space would have looked at how to use even artificial intelligence to run models and data that could have never been done humanly, right? And so as new industries come together, I do believe, and there are a lot of hurdles and there's a lot of work ahead of us, but I do believe that it can be possible, because that's what it's going to take, is technologies that haven't even been invented yet, right? And that means looking outside the box. I have an artificial intelligence background. I spoke with a scientist at the Los Alamos Labs who's focusing on artificial intelligence in terms of surveying and trying to find pockets of super hot rock, right? And that's a big step in even being able to test. But I do agree with you that there's a long road ahead of us. For example, our project at the University of Oklahoma, we call it a moonshot, right? There's a lot of work. We do believe that if it works, it will change the world. But we're not scared to the investment road ahead of us. But for me personally, and I think I've heard this from you and others, there's a common thread of passion that is driving people to face these hurdles and climb these mountains. For me, And at Deep Power, it's the ability to have the democratization of power, right? To disconnect all of the sources of energy from tyrants or governments or those that could control and manipulate. For me, if you could drill 2 9-inch holes 5 miles deep in the middle of a city, a small town, right, and power the whole town autonomously without connection to other, I mean, that's worthy of our efforts. And it's exciting. There's a lot of daunting challenges, but it's exciting to try to be a part of something that can change the world. And that's why we're here. And I know that's why you're leading the charge at CATF on this. So again, I'm grateful for your expertise and for your energy and interest in connecting and broadcasting and allowing us to have a platform for our audience or those that kind of follow us. I suggest that you reach out and go to their website, learn what CATF does, become familiar with them and their cause and their mission and all the different areas of their programs, because they need your support, and that support will help all of us, I believe, in the industry. So Terra, thank you for your time. Love to know if you have any final comments or anything else you'd like to share with us.
Only, Andrew, that you touched a heartstring when you talk about energy independence. I think that was really that is a defining characteristic of this, firm power that can actually reach scale that we only see in fossils today. It's definitely what moves me. I often think, where would we be today if if we had invested in this 10 years ago, and the Ukraine-Russian war would have completely different leverage. And I think we would be in it. Well, that is hypothetical, but
Yeah.
it is what moves me, is
Yep.
to empower and reconfigure the balance of powers.
Right. I agree with you. And I think that is, as you're talking to people, like I said, that is a common thread. And when you have a group of people driven by passion, passion will always overcome hurdles, right? And that's what's required to really climb a mountain, is that passion. So again, for those watching this, go to the website, follow their social media. They often post new updates about just industry news in general or advancements. So Terra, thank you again. We look forward to staying in touch, and we look forward to watching the progress of you and CTF and the industry as a whole. So thank you again today.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure.